So many of you may know the Comptroller's office has been around for a very long time. On the 36th Comptroller of Public Accounts, it goes all the way back to the days of Washington on Nebraska. Literally back then, the person that had a job was easier. In part, one, because the state had no money whatsoever, but a hard part because we were having a revolution. So very, very different time period. Put into place, state constitution has been an elected position, 4-year elected position ever since that time. What do we do? So the main core constitutional responsibilities, I've got 26 divisions within the state agency, a very large agency, 2,900 people. However, the 3 core constitutional duties end up being, number 1 is the Treasury. So all of your state budget, whether if you had a glass in front of you, just as an analogy, an example, 1/3 of that would be filled with federal money, our dollars that go to DC, come back here, and then the other 2/3 are state dollars. The biggest portion of the state dollars are obviously taxes. Now back to the Treasury. So your state budget, $108.5 billion a year for that entire cup of federal and state dollars goes to the Treasury. We make every single payment, and we make sure that all the dollars that are appropriated by the legislature to the various 100 agencies here in the state of Texas are allocated the way they should be. So we audit all the agencies after the payment to make sure those payments are made properly, and we make all of the payments. So roughly 12 million payments a year. Just to make a point, if I had to sit at my desk 20 hours a work week and sign checks, we issue about 12 million payments a year, but obviously I don't sign every check. But if I did sign every check during a 40-hour work week, I'd have to sign 96 checks every 60 seconds just to issue all the payments out of the Treasury. So a very large operation is my point. However, the Treasury runs more than 40 hours a week. It runs 7 days a week. For example, when we had the bad, obviously, Hurricane Harvey a year ago, we were issuing a lot of different checks that were coming through federal dollars. So we were working in conjunction with one of our state agencies to make sure every payment was going to do what it was supposed to. So we were issuing a lot of checks night, during the day, 7 days a week, the Treasury runs. However, then let's skip over to, let's say, for example, tax collection. Yeah, I'll admit it, I don't have a backboard behind me. I'm your tax collector. So every single payment that is paid by the taxpayers in the state of Texas, for a state tax, that is, the vast majority of the state tax collected is sales tax. So when you go purchase something from around here, you pay a sales tax, the 6 1/4, they issue to the state, we collect it, and then we remit the 2 cents or whatever that is on the local basis back to the local jurisdiction. So that's the largest portion of the agency, is the tax collection side. And then thirdly, monitoring the economy. So one of the constitutional duties is the day before a legislative session, my office, myself, is supposed to estimate and tell the legislature. As you know, the Texas legislature goes into session in an odd given year, the second Tuesday of January in an odd given year. So the day before, constitutionally, I estimate and tell the legislature how much money they will have coming into the state treasury. It's hard to put a budget together if you don't have an idea. Now, people ask me, how easy is that? Not very easy. Why Texas today? Let's go back 4 years ago, back when I first ran for this office in November, almost a year ago in a month. We had oil prices that were $60-something a barrel. You go through several months, it started declining. A year from that, it went to just below $30 a barrel. So the point just being, in that industry alone and the manufacturing industry during that time period, Texas lost 160,000 jobs just in those 2 industry sectors. So obviously, if you lost your job, very impactful. If you were one of those in a company and some of those companies went bankrupt, very impactful. Texas at that time was the 12th largest economy in the entire world. Think about that. 254 counties in Texas, 12 economic regions is what we like to break Texas up into. Say, for example, where we are at today in Harris County, the greater Houston metropolitan area, whether it's Harris County, Waller County, Montgomery County, Brazos County, Fort Bend County, Galveston County, Chambers County, the greater metropolitan area. This area, if it was a state in and of itself, just to make a point from a personal take-home pay, there's roughly about the people in this area, the employees bring take-home over $350 million a year in take-home pay. And you go, well, what does that mean? That would be the 15th largest state in this nation for take-home pay. The Metroplex would be the 14th largest state in the nation. So when you start adding up all of those different regions of the state of Texas, and you can quickly see why Texas, a $1.6, $1.7 trillion economy, was the 12th largest economy in the world. Now, the question that I had at that time, as we were going through that economic downturn, Texas has outpaced the national average year after year for economic growth, yet during 2016, we had zero growth as a state. Now, some areas of the state grew, the Metroplex, Austin area, San Antonio, the Permian Basin did not, the Eagle Ford Shale did not, the Houston area was pretty much stagnant as an overall, so the state was a zero. We lost 160,000 jobs, and the question was, were we still going to be the 12th largest economy in the world? And in fact, I was right, we were no longer the 12th largest economy in the world. What I had wrong, though, is I thought we would have moved down the list. Question were we still going to be larger than Australia, larger than the Spain economy, larger than the economy of the southern border of Mexico? In fact, Texas didn't go down the list. We moved up the list to number 10. So today, we're the 10th largest economy in the entire world. And you go, well, wait, that something doesn't make sense there. Some of you might see my Aggie ring and wonder what kind of Aggie math I used to get us from 12 to 10. And in fact, the answer is pretty simple. The two countries that Texas moved over, went from 12 to 10, had a larger portion of their economy that was based on oil and gas and manufacturing than Texas. Who are they? Give you a hint. One of them straight north of here. It's very cold in the wintertime. They have a maple leaf on their flag. If you're not good with flags, I'll give you a hint. It's Canada. The other country is also very cold in the wintertime. Part of it's in Europe, part of it is in Asia. If you still can't figure it out, their president, who seems like he's been there forever, suspended the Constitution. And in fact, that country has been talked about every day in the media for the last 4 years. If you still can't figure it out, you may have seen their president who likes to have his photo ops without his shirt on when he fly fishes in horseback. Anybody figure out who it is? Russia, exactly. Now think about that. Every time you hear people rant and rave about Russia, Russia, Russia in the media, think about, I don't know why they worry about Russia. Texas economy is bigger than the Russian economy. They should be focused on Texas. So back to Texas. Even though we lost 160,000 jobs, it's pretty remarkable to know that in the last 81 months, which was the start of that time period of downturn, Texas has only lost jobs 4 months. And if you go back to the time when I gave the revenue estimate to the legislature before last session, almost 2 years ago, come this January, it'll be 2 years ago, in the prior 12 months through 2016, Texas essentially gained roughly 150,000 jobs. You fast forward later in that year, it was 230,000 jobs. You fast forward to January of this year, it was over 300,000 jobs. By this summer, it was 360,000 jobs in the prior 12 months. As of last month, Texas has created over 390,000 jobs. You put that in perspective, since the end of the Great Recession, Great Financial Crisis back in 2007, 2 million jobs have been created in this state. You go, well, what does that really mean? I'll put it in perspective. If you add up all 50 states, put the job creation in those 12 months, or those 10 years, in fact, the Texas job creation is about 25% of the job creation of the entire nation, which is pretty phenomenal. So every morning when you wake up, think about this. You wonder why you're stuck in traffic, I'm about to tell you, is because every morning when you wake up, think about this for a week, every day when you wake up for a week. Every morning when you wake up, there's 570 more people in Texas just based on natural growth, which means births minus deaths of every single day, natural growth, and then in addition to that, somewhere between 520 to 530 people move into this state every single day. You know where the #1 destination of all the nation for U-Haul fans are? Texas. If you look at a map, we put a few things on the website of the Comptroller's office for a little while there that showed #1 destination was Texas. One-way destinations out of which state means they were not receiving as many to equal the number they were leaving were where? States like California, Illinois, the Northwest, so somewhere in Northeast, in those areas. So the Texas economy is doing really well. And so overall, the point being is of what we monitor, what I look at is the state economy is doing well. I'm projected to continue to do well in the future. I'm going to mention one other thing and then I'll stop and answer questions. Every year, we close our books in August. That's the state's fiscal year. So September starts a new fiscal year. Somewhere between 60 and 90 days after the fiscal year ends, I will take the amount, a certain portion amount of revenue that we have in oil and natural gas sales tax, natural severance taxes that is, of oil and natural gas, and then I will move that into our state savings account. So roughly the way it works, $530 million that comes into the treasury based on Oil severance taxes stays in the general treasury. 590 million of natural gas severance taxes stays in the general treasury. 25% above those numbers stays in for public education. 37.5% above those numbers goes into our state savings account, and an equal amount goes over to our highway fund to build transportation roads. So when I transfer an amount over into both the highway fund and the state savings account here next month, our state savings account will have roughly $11.9 billion in that fund, which will be a record for the state of Texas. And you go, well, what does that mean? If you add up all 50 state savings accounts, our savings account would be roughly about 23% of the fund balance of all 50 states. So thankfully, we have a very robust oil and gas sector in the Permian Basin. Every day, roughly every week, we monitor on Friday what are the number of rigs operating in Texas. Have for a very long time. I get a new update. I got one yesterday. And just like we've had for the trend for the last year and a half, 50% of all the rigs operated in all of North America are where? In Texas. So Texas has a real opportunity based on that industry sector alone. But our state savings account, when it was put back in the 1980s, was when this structure was put into place. Some of us as voters approved it, yet statutorily, legal-wise, my office, as the custodian of those dollars, essentially just put most of it in overnight cash. So in other words, you got 11 point some odd billion now sitting there in cash like a coffee can, stuffed in a coffee can, buried on the Capitol lawn. Now don't go to the Capitol with your shovel because it's really not there. But that's an example that it is literally just sitting underground doing nothing, and no one would do that. My office, we have several different endowments that we're entrusted with. The tobacco settlement dollars, remember several years ago? We have those, we invest those. They're more defensive than offensive. We're not trying to lose the money. We're just trying to make sure that it covers inflation plus a slightly higher amount. And so doing that, we distribute them out every single year to the hospital districts and systems around the state of Texas. In other words, to help pay for uncompensated care. Now, if we did a like thing with the Economic Stabilization Fund, then as a state, as your state CFO, which is my job and title per se, is it is prudent to take those dollars. If we're not going to distribute them out for some reason, it is not to sit on those dollars, it's just that they're cash buried under the dirt somewhere. We don't do that in today's world. That was about centuries ago. So I proposed to the legislature that we change the structure of that fund. And in order to do that, to be able to make a higher rate of return, which then we could pay off some of the long-term liabilities of this state, i.e. pension costs and others, which are going to cause a problem for this state at some point in time. Are they a crisis today? No. But they are a crisis in many other states. They're a crisis in many other cities. As you recall, we've been through that with Houston, and Houston is in a better shape. Yet we've got to do more for Houston not to be financially in an awful position come several years from now. And what I'm trying to do is head off for the next generation to have to pay the bills for this generation, which is my generation and yours. I've got a 13-year-old daughter, a 10-year-old daughter, and a 10-year-old son. They're proud 7th generation Texans. And I want to make sure that that 7th generation has the same economic opportunity that G's generations have. And so reforming the way we handle that economic stabilization fund can create a significant amount of income that we can deal with those very real issues that face this state. So with that, I will stop. Questions, comments, complaints? Yes, sir.
I remember when you came here 4 years ago, campaigning for the position that you got. I don't remember the exact details you talked about, but I do think that you talked about how having a fiscal conservative as part of the Comptroller department would help the state of Texas. Could you elaborate on that, and what have you done?
Yeah, very good. I mean, number one, when I came into this office, my main focus is customer service. So who are the customers? They're the taxpayers. I mean, that's who the customers are. I collect the money, I pay the bills, I have a fiduciary responsibility to the taxpayers. So one, making sure that we have a motto within the agency that first and foremost you're always thinking about customer service. So that's one aspect. Two aspect is looking at, as I said, I've talked a lot about the 3 core constitutional duties. So what is my main purpose and what is my mission? I have a lot of responsibilities legislature's given me beyond those. However, with that being said, that's supposed to be my main focus, and my main task is on those issues and not trying to broaden out into other areas. So focusing on what we do every single day. Also making sure that the legislature and policymakers and the public, which is us who pay the bills, knows exactly what those bills are. You know, too often time we talk about the most immediate thing that is today, but we don't talk about what that thing is into the future. We like to sweep it under the rug, per se, kick the can down the road. And so if you were looking at it from a strong fiscal position as a conservative, you're looking at all those, and the truth is the truth. The numbers are the numbers. And so by focusing on those issues, it's key and important, because otherwise people like to sweep things under the rug and say, we'll pass it on to the next generation. No, somebody has to pay those bills. Somebody's going to pay those bills in the future, and it doesn't matter who's driving the train, whether it's Republicans, it's Democrats, a combination, or above. The person in this job needs to make sure they're telling exactly what the full story is. And I think that's where those conservative values come into place.
I know your office puts out an email that I get periodically, and it's not too often, and it's not, you know, and it's often enough.
Don't want to inundate you, but don't want you to never have information either.
But it's really got good stuff, and when you put out stuff about the depth of our school districts and things like that, that's great stuff. Now, how can people get signed up for that?
Yeah, so you can actually go to Comptroller.com and look up our website. You can actually email me, Glenn, GLENN.HEGAR at cpa.texas.gov, and you can get it. We can make sure that you get on that list. Yes, sir.
I know but you said CFO, your job is pay bills.
Right.
But if you were made king for the day, what taxes would you recommend for resolution?
I'll give you an example. I got asked by one of my former colleagues, I'm going to borrow this piece of paper here, not long after I got into office, first few days that I was testifying in the legislature, and they said, can you tell me what is the tax that people like to pay? I can easily give you an answer to that question. And he looked, and several of the other senators looked at me like, really? What kind of tax is that? And I had my notes. I don't really talk with notes. I look over them, but I just have them. And so I took my notes and I said, well, here, let me show you. I have them on this piece of paper right here. Just for this question, I was prepared. Like, yeah, right, sure. And I said, here it is, right here on this piece of paper. They all looked, and he looked, and I said, no, it's right here. Can you all see it? It's right here. And I said, it's none. No one likes to pay any. And so I guess if you paid none, but then it'd be hard to pay for roads and schools and the core basic responsibilities. If we look at some of the, Texas is blessed in one very strong aspect, that if you really look at any tax system, there's really 3 main taxes that exist in the world. There's a whole pile of taxes, whether it's utility bills, alcohol, tobacco, cigarette, a tax on business, which is the franchise tax, which is called a margins tax when you talk about property tax, sales tax, wide variety of different taxes that are out there. But the 3 main ones that bring in the bulk of any revenue into any governmental system are really 3. The rest of them, they bring in some, and they may pick winners and losers depending on who's paying those. But as far as funding the basics of government, whether broad or small that is, you have 3. Income tax, we don't have it in Texas, and we're never going to have it because that'd be a constitutional amendment, and I can't find hardly any voters in the state of Texas that want to pay that. So the 2 legs to the stool for Texas ends up being sales tax and property taxes. Now, if you really want to talk about an area that needs to have a significant amount of reform, I think it's the property tax system. Really, because with the growth that we have, and I've got a publication that's coming out later this fall that talks about school finance and property taxes. And the reason being is if you live in a city, a municipality, 50% of your tax bill on the property side is what? ISD. If you live in the unincorporated area, which is a large portion of Harris County, what is the property tax bill? 2/3 of it is ISD. Now, when that school system was put into place 30 plus years ago, no one ever envisioned that Texas would have 1,000 people a day, 1,100 people a day. all this influx of people, natural growth, the pressure that it puts on your residential home side, whether it puts on the commercial side of these buildings out here, which don't have a 10% appraisal cap, all of it puts an enormous amount of pressure in the rising values, and that rising values are things that every person can't afford from year to year with that increase. And so I think because Texas has only two, we're only going to have two, we really have got to figure out that property tax side, because I think that's where it's going to essentially stymie the growth of the state of Texas, but it's also putting an undue burden on the average citizens of this state. Now, the margins tax, we can get into that. The fact is, since it's a margin, it's not a net profit. It's not a gross, it's a hybrid between the two. That causes a lot of problems because you're not taxed on net profit. You're taxed on a profit plus something else. And so there's an unfairness in that system as well. But I'd say the property tax is the one that we have to address as a state more than anything else. Yes, sir.
Yes, currently there's hundreds of millions of dollars coming into Harris County through the SWIFT program.
Mm-hmm.
Now, does the state controller's office audit how those funds are spent? Or do they just accept the audit that is in?
No, so those of you that may not know, there was a certain amount of dollars that was taken out of the state's economic stabilization fund, state savings account, $2 billion to be exact, and put over in custody to have